Still with the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja, it has threatened to jail the Director General of the Department of State Services, DSS, Yusuf Bichi, over the continued detention of the convener of the Revolution Now movement and his co-accused Olawale Bakare. Justice Ijoma Ojukwu gave the warning yesterday after previously issuing a notice of consequences of disobedience of court order on the DSS. The court warned that unless the DSS Director General obeyed the order of the Federal High Court ordering him to release the defendants, he would be guilty of contempt of court and will be liable to be committed to prison. Mr. Shore was arrested August the 3rd for planning a protest which gained public attention under the hashtag Revolution Now and has been in detention since then. Although they had been granted bail twice, both Mr. Shore and Mr. Bakare have still not been released by the DSS, which insists that Shore would only be released to his sureties. Meanwhile, Mr. Shore has also filed a suit against the agency, demanding 500 million naira for illegally detaining him and violating his fundamental human rights. Now, with President Muhammadu Buhari's call for judicial officers to work towards the creation of special courts, and this is to assist in the speedy administration and dispensation of justice in the country, it was also asking for the consideration on how to create an efficient structure for the proposed special crimes court or the urgent designation of existing courts as special courts with competent and credible judicial officers in order to remove some of the administrative bottlenecks. Well, on all of these issues, we speak to a legal practitioner to find out what some of these challenges are and indeed some of the solutions. I'm being joined in the studio by a legal practitioner, Mr. Sonny Awunuga. I would like to thank you again for joining us.
Very good afternoon.
So the President is calling for several reforms, but to you, what would you say is the fundamental reform, or rather the fundamental issue affecting our justice system?
Well, I think first and foremost, they say charity begins at home. That is one. And two, it might appear regrettably that they say image is everything. People looking at the president, he might mean well, but there are some actions from the executive which negates the same thing he's trying to preach. You don't go to the house of the judges at midnight, invading them without notice. You can't, for example, as a president against the Constitution, claim that you are suspending a sitting CJ and all that. All those things, they are things that will kind of mitigate against this thing we are saying. These judges, they are human beings. First and foremost, we have to realize that. Now, I think the important thing there, which we have failed to note, is that the judges themselves, they have several limitations. For instance, if a judge is indicted for one reason or the other, that is the end. They can't practice again. It can only be in a consultancy. Likewise, they are aware that unlike other people, they are supposed to be seen, not heard. So despite the fact that the president appears to mean well, there are some things that need to be done. A lot of homework needs to be done. All those things, the judges look at these things, like I said, for instance, that, oh, okay, fine, we are saying we should bring our needs to the table. What are these needs that we're talking about? Nothing. The most important thing that I think is being there is that you should let it be seen that the judiciary not only has independence, but is seen to have independence. Because
but you mentioned that the judges are only seen but not to be heard. Does
yes.
that put them at a disadvantage as being the weaker link of the third arm?
It does. The third arm? For instance, now recently the chairman of the Senate Committee on Judiciary, Senator Bamde, was saying that, oh, even if they bring angels from heaven, they won't be able to sanitize the judiciary. Do you expect the CJN to react? It cannot, because he's not a politician. But to me, I think that's an unfair aspersion being cast on the judiciary. I'm not saying they are saints. No, take that away. In every institution, even all over the world, once in a while, you get rotten next. But that doesn't mean one should allow a wholesale lambasting of the judiciary.
But isn't there a constitutional mandate? Just like we have the executive, they have to execute
and that's
their
exactly
duties.
And that's exactly what I mentioned in the first instance. That, okay, we have Mr. President, it means well. I don't know whether he's surrounded by advisors who tell him feel good things and stuff. Because you look at it at times, what we hear is different from what we see. A president who can do this apparently means well, but look at instances where I've mentioned, it will never go away. Some people will still remember, so the same president who said, oh, he was listening to the chairman of the Code of Conduct and who instructed him to remove the CJ. The same president now won't instruct or wouldn't listen I'm assuming, to the Attorney General, maybe to release some people who the courts have ordered to be released. So when you are saying you are trying to give the judiciary so much freedom and whatever it is, the people themselves they are careful that, okay, maybe do as I mean, your body language is one thing. What you say is another thing. So the fundamental problem is let's, like they say, put your money where your mouth is. Walk the talk, like they say overseas. If you say one thing, let's see clearly that you mean this thing, not that it appears as a political statement that matches the occasion.
But that's on the part of the executive. How
Yes.
about the judiciary? Can't they help themselves?
Well, the problem is, don't forget that in this system, for instance, like you rightly said, there are three arms. The executive, whether you believe it or not, is the most powerful, followed by the legislature.
So they're not
the
equal.
Judiciary is there. People who say the judiciary is the last hope of the common man. No, I think it's the same executive that is, in fact, the last hope of the common man. Things you will expect because it flows down. The judiciary is the last bastion. And when some things happen perpetually, over the same time, because they say you can't continue doing the same thing the same way and expect a different result. Naturally, the people involved, they will tread with a caution. The independence of the judiciary is guaranteed under the Constitution. But has this been so? No. So I think the area we should focus on, for instance, has to do with creating strong institutions, especially in the realm of checks and balances. For instance, there's no reason why the CJN should also be the head of the NJC or the head of the Federal Judicial Service Commission. Those things should be done in such a way that these things, they are just there naturally. No one individual can just have so much power. Because like they say, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Are you confident of the existence of a special crimes court? Do you think that will solve, anything, especially the fact that the president is looking at it to handle some corrupt cases? Do you think the judiciary will see this as a welcome development?
You see, like we say in the profession, it is better for 10 guilty men to walk away free than for an innocent person to be convicted. No one is saying that the law should be lax or treat criminality with a levity. But the challenge there is justice is not like selling oranges. You don't just buy and sell like that. It involves the process. So creating special courts is one thing. But like I said, at the same time, a conducive environment where the judge who is sitting can truly believe that, yes, without fear or favor, if he delivers this judgment, there won't be consequences. Not one, for instance, where one or two judges have ordered the release of people and nothing is still happening. The judge might have what they call buyer's remorse and be wondering whether I should just have quietly said, oh, I can't see facts before me that enable to. Because for whatever reason a judge gives, there's always a reason to support for it.
But now they've said, for example, threatened to jail the DSS DG over continued detention of Mr. Shore.
Fine, on paper, that is possible. But in practice, do we see the DG of the DSS going to jail? I mean, let's be real about this. At least, definitely, the person is reporting to someone. He has a superior he's reporting to. He's either reporting to the commander-in-chief directly, or maybe he's reporting to the NSA or something like that. They are aware about all these developments too. They are not the charge. So if the government truly is bothered about this, I think it's just a phone call to this gentleman. What is happening? We don't understand this. So while I'm not saying there's complicity from the government over this, but something is wrong if the action is not condemned, nor is there any step towards a compliance from the government, because it's an agency of government, of which the head is responsible to someone in government too.
We appreciate your time. We must go. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Sonny Onugo, for joining us at this time. Still to come on the program, 6 suspects have been handed over to the police, and this is over the death of the PDP woman leader in Kogi State. Find out details when we return.